welcome everyone to the Town of Somerset's oversight hearing, where we have a great opportunity to learn about the outstanding fire service in Montgomery County. And as we start, I want to personally thank Chief D. Howard Richards for her incredible help in organizing and planning today. And so I'm going to turn the mic over to her now.
Mr. Mayor, thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here and as always to serve, in this instance, the members and the people who live in Somerset, but to Montgomery County as a whole. Just want to take this opportunity to say thank you for caring enough about your community and the services that we provide to encourage your residents to be a part of a forum like this, because you know, safety is our #1 priority, and we're very happy that you have taken that into consideration also. So again, my name is D. Howard Richards. I am an assistant chief with Montgomery County Fire Rescue. And currently I serve as the fire chief. He's on here, Scott Goldstein. I serve as his executive assistant. So I like to say that I am the catch-all. The fire chief has, as you can imagine, a huge plate. He is responsible for close to 3,000 men and women, both volunteer and career, that serve Montgomery County Fire Rescue. And so he has a huge plate, and there, as you can imagine, are a lot of tasks that come with that. And so as his executive assistant, I serve as, you know, as an individual who does my best to kind of help him manage that plate and to sometimes catch some of the things when the plate is overloaded and overwhelmed. So one of the things, a few of the people that I feel that will be instrumental in today's meeting that have come along with me today, in addition to the fire chief, Scott Goldstein. We also have Division Chief Charles Bailey. Charles Bailey is one of the key individuals who helps the fire chief run the fire department. He is in charge of all operations. So anytime you see rubber meeting the road, that is Chief Bailey's responsibility. Also with us today is Division Chief Mike Kelly. Mike Kelly, whenever it involves volunteer efforts, operations, Division Chief Kelly is responsible for that. We also have with us today Chief Victor Esch. Chief Victor Esch is the chief of the Bethesda Fire Department, and Mr. Nathaniel, I don't know if he prefers Nathaniel or Nathan Fickelstein, he is the president of Bethesda Fire Department. I don't think I've missed anybody on our team, but Mr. Mayor, if you'd like me to go further, I can continue, but I would like to really give my fire chief an opportunity to say welcome, because I think he has another meeting to attend.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. Please, Chief Goldstein, welcome. Welcome to the Town of Somerset.
Thank you very much. And as Dee outlined, the team you have here encompasses a large part of and the main parts of FRS's management that plays into and supports the Bethesda area, or this area specifically with the Town of Somerset. Indeed, everybody, I'm glad to say that I'm looking out the window and the roads are still wet. There's no snow, but it takes a lot of coordination to ensure we can answer all of the 911 calls, answer all of the community needs. And today is just another great example of different challenges that we would be facing had it in turn been a snow event, and had it in turn, you know, been like like Sunday's activities. A tad bit about myself. There is indeed about 2,700, 3,000 folks of MCFRS, and all of that lands into or stops at my desk here. Been with the service of MCFRS for 31 years. Started as a pretty young volunteer with the Kensington Volunteer Fire Department for 3 years before that. So very proud of the men and women of MCFRS and all of its 19 volunteer fire departments and the 37 stations that are scattered throughout the community. A lot goes on that you all get the opportunity to see, and as the members of the service, anybody who maybe has been through Leadership Montgomery or any of the other opportunities to see a snapshot of behind the scenes, a great deal goes on behind the scenes to make the response to 911 calls possible. So thank you all as representatives of your community and the town for being a part of the town and helping the town. So we're here to help you all, and you've got a great team assembled today. So
well, thank you, Chief. I know you had a challenging schedule today, and we greatly appreciate you making an exception to join us. And we'll be in touch with you.
Yep, we'll be good. And then the phone, I'm sure, will ring at some point. But yeah, I'll be on until about 12:25 or so.
Okay, wonderful. And thank you for having my own personal hotline to you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our host for today, which is our council member, Shannon Rovak, who is also the liaison to our Public Safety Committee, to do some introduction.
Thank you all for your time and doing the great introductions to begin with. So I want to thank you guys for being able to attend this today. We have had many resident questions about the ambulance staffing, as well as the volunteers and how it works with the Bethesda Fire Department. So we wanted to have this hearing to get a better understanding. So with that, I will turn it over to Chief Bailey.
Okay, great. So my name's Charles Bailey. You guys, you've been introduced to my role in the fire department. What I want to talk to you about today is some ways to think about your fire rescue service. And this presentation is slated to last for about 20 minutes. I've never been accused of being concise before in my life. So you guys are going to have to bear with me. And I'm willing for the mayor to say enough is enough and just stop talking. But what I think is important, and I did this with a group in Silver Spring a couple of weeks ago. I think it's just so easy to get caught up in details and minutia, but without some cogent framework by which to assess and approach the problem, I think we're at a deficit. So I'd like to provide that in a few short minutes. So one of the big things that my boss has to do, and that we as his supporters and subordinates have to do, is consider risk. And when we think about risk, we think about it, oh my God, we just ended a meeting an hour or a few minutes ago that was about an hour long. And all we talked about was our definitions for risk. And so the big risks that we're talking about and thinking about from a fire rescue perspective are untreated injury and illness, a property loss from fires. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a structure fire. It could be something as simple as a grass fire. And this has happened in Germantown, that impedes or catches the Pepco substation on fire too. And then you lose power to an area and there's business interruption. And so when we talk about property loss, there's a whole lot of loss that can come from fires that's not necessarily tied to a structure. And we're also pretty deeply concerned about the environment. We spend, along with our partners and county government and the state, time chasing down spills in our creeks and tributaries. And I think you guys heard recently about some mysterious spill in the Potomac River. We work pretty hard to prevent environmental damage as well. So we consider that risk too. When we talk about risk mitigation, things get even more complex because there's ways to categorize risk. There's different value systems at work. But we talk about a couple of different things. One is sort of ex ante mitigation, and when we use the word mitigation, we mean any action or activity that would lessen the impact of an event. So pre-treating the highway in advance of a snowstorm is a mitigation activity. It reduces the chances that the snow's going to stick and the roadways are going to be impassable. That's an ex ante approach to mitigation because we do this before the event happens. Once the event happens, sticking with the snow, and there's snow on the ground, you can be in a collision. And that collision, if you have an untreated injury, could lead to horrible outcomes. So in that way, we are involved in ex post mitigation because we show up after the event occurred and we engage in activities that lessen the impact of that event. When we consider risk from a fire rescue perspective, we tend to consider that risk at the system level, even though most of our action, and this is kind of an important concept, it takes place at a local level, right? So while we consider risk systemically in this 499.4 square miles of Montgomery County, of primary concern to you and the individual is what happens locally. And important in that is the relationships we have with the local fire departments or volunteer fire departments we'll talk about a little bit later. And it's also important to know that all this occurs with centralized coordination. There are some guardrails. There are some things that limit us in the exercise of our work. First of all, fire departments require a lot of infrastructure. They require buildings to operate out of, and they're not cheap. And there's not a whole bunch of land that is available in Montgomery County for building fire rescue stations. We have competing risk frameworks and value structures. There is an overwhelming desire, I think you see this a lot, to reduce the amount of pedestrian versus vehicle fatalities. And there are some pretty simple ways to do that, but nothing comes without, associated impacts, right? So there's always this competition involved when you're trying to solve a problem. We do have environmental concerns, and of late, more especially of late, we as in the fire department are forced, and not against our will, but we're forced to frame everything through the equity lens, whether that's racial equity or social equity, regardless, things get framed through that lens. So when we talk about risk mitigation, I'd like to introduce the concept of capabilities. And this is going to be kind of a big deal in a minute or two when we talk about service in Somerset specifically. One of the biggest things we want to do is be able to provide advanced life support, that's a paramedic, to people in need in a timely fashion quickly, right? And there are national standards. And you'll notice that I avoid numbers because I mix them up. And I don't want to say we get you there in 4 minutes when it's really 4.5. So, but we want to get you advanced life support paramedics. And these guys, and the real purpose of these guys and girls is to do everything possible to prevent you from getting sicker going into a cardiac arrest. And this is for situations where maybe you're having coronary infarct, chest pains, or shortness of breath, and those sorts of things, and left untreated, you'd go into cardiac arrest. We spend a lot of time talking about cardiac arrest because that's a big deal. That means your heart stopped, you stop breathing. And in that situation, one of the biggest things we can do for you is to provide a defibrillator. All right. So first, we want to stop you from getting to that point. We do that with ALS. If you happen to be at that point, the first and best thing we can provide for you is the defibrillator to reverse the cardiac arrhythmia that puts you in that position. And the faster we can apply that defibrillator, the better off we are. And then we want to do really good CPR. Here in Montgomery County, we do what's called high performance CPR. The teams out there, they take it very, very seriously. And they actually drill and practice on the different positions and roles that people play during CPR events. And then the last big risk mitigation capability I want to talk about is water. When there is a fire, whether it's a structure fire or grass fire, or whatever kind of fire it is, one of the best things that we can do is provide for the rapid application of water to burning surfaces, right? So we like to keep those capabilities in mind, those four, let's call them pillars for the purposes of this discussion. So let's look at Somerset. Now, if you're looking at this, you're thinking, why didn't he just throw a map? Because I practiced last night, and I don't know if it was the bandwidth at my house, but every time I put a map in, I'd have all these boxes and the map wouldn't load right away. So I took the map out and I drew all those lines about 10 o'clock last night. And I just don't have a degree in art or graphic design, so you'll bear with me. But you see, I kind of try to map out where you live. I use a gray starburst to represent Somerset. You see Massachusetts Avenue, River Road, Old Georgetown Road up towards the top. Maybe my cursor will help a little bit. Bradley, and this is a facility you're most familiar with that sits at Bradley in Wisconsin. I put East-West Highway over there, and over here in the top right is Fire Station 7. Interesting enough, most of Somerset, and I think it's about 420 homes, falls within Fire Station 6's area. The westernmost section falls within Fire Station 11's first response area. But what I want you to look at, and this is why we talked about it first, is don't think about it just as what's happening at Fire Station 6. Think about it in totality. And what this diagram shows you is that within a few minutes, I can provide 10 units to an address in Somerset that are capable of performing high performance CPR. Those same 10 units also come with defibrillators. There is some variation in the number of transport units because sometimes BCC staffs 1 or 2 transport units, sometimes Fire Station 7 staffs extra BLS units, and Fire Station 11 has been in the habit of staffing extra units. The asterisk indicates the fact that that station sometimes provides a higher or more frequent level of service than usual. And so if you look here at Fire Station 11, it says 1.4 ALS. Well, we provide ALS consistently through engine one. I was using the old number system. Through engine 711, there's always an ALS provider on engine 711. The volunteers at Glen Echo do a really good job of putting extra ALS capability in, which I don't know the real number, and my boss is on the phone, so don't rat me out. I don't know if it's 1.4 or 1.7, but it felt good to say 1.4, so just play along with me, okay? You also have 3 engines that carry water, 1 ladder truck, and 1 heavy rescue, all pretty close. I take that and wrap that up to say Somerset as a locality is really well resourced for those 4 really important things that we're worried about, which is ALS, CPR, water. Here's the other thing that's super important. It is really, and I struggle from this when I first got started. When I first started in the fire department, we were hyper territorial about our first due area, our response district, right? And we wanted to be the guys on that call because it was our area. For the past couple of years, more than in previous times, it's important to note that our resource assignments are calculated in real time based on where you actually are, not some static point on a map. So if the engine from Station 6 went to the BCC Rescue Squad to pick up a package or drop off some mail, the computer knows where they are, and the call comes out in Somerset, and the computer knows that the engine from Glen Echo is actually 2 minutes closer than the engine from Bethesda in real time. And so where it used to be that our response assignments were based on these geographical designators we used to call box areas, It is now the computer runs a new route every time there's an incident, and it looks out across every single unit and ranks them by space, and it's down to the second. So if an ambulance from Bethesda and an ambulance from Chevy Chase are sitting at the same intersection, the computer will calculate that one is 3 seconds closer to Somerset than the other, and it will send the one that's 3 seconds closer, right? And it does get down to that minute level of detail. So how do you determine need? And I'll tell you this, and it breaks my heart a little bit. Hard research into EMS and fire and public, EMS and fire. I think on the police side, it's a little bit better. There's not a lot of people doing real hard data-driven research into our line of work. For EMS, that's changing. And what I mean by that is, we're seeing some good work in published jury, publications that dig into the data sets and draw some reasonable conclusions. But when we talk about predictors for demand, and some of the reason that this stuff is here is that I am making an attempt in my 20 minutes to address every question that Ms. Rovak asked of me without just going question by question. But some of the predictors for this demand nationally, right, and is historical data. Where were the calls last year? Subsequent to that, there's this notion of socioeconomics, age, and I think, and don't take these things as ordered ranking, right? These are just, there's no order here. And population density. It makes sense, it's intuitive, where if I have an area in downtown Silver Spring where I do, where there's 18,000 people per square mile, that there would be a higher demand for EMS service, right? That's just kind of intuitive. And if I look like an area like Leisure World, where it's an over 55 community, 9,000 people in a concentrated geographic area, it just makes sense that when I put that cohort together, there would be increased demand for EMS service. On the fire side, again, there's scant data. A lot of our work is based on where the fires have been in the past. And the one thing that kind of sticks out in the limited research is people of lower socioeconomic status are disproportionately affected by fires, whether it be in terms of property loss, injury, or death. And then again, we're back to this intuitive notion that population density plays a pretty big role in predicting fire demand. So thinking about that, we go back to look at 3 years of data for the town of Somerset. And what we looked for was any instance of a fire rescue response in that geographic boundary that defines Somerset. And what you'll see is that the call demand is two things. It's consistent year over year. It doesn't change very much. And it's on the low end. 30 calls, 26 calls, 26 calls. There is not a lot of demand in that area. Now, so we talked about all those things. There's a couple other big points I want to make, and this kind of ties into this notion of our resources are managed in real time based on your actual location. I like to talk about and this is a big thing for me with this notion of equity, right? So what I can guarantee you from a fire rescue perspective in terms of equity is ex-ante equity in terms of access to the system, because we operate a countywide, completely 100% agnostic telephone-based gateway to make access to the system. And at no point during the triage process, which is sort of the intermediates that we're asking questions, does race, gender, or socioeconomic status play in to the question. And in this part of the process, you get divided up into categories, right? At first it's police, fire, EMS, and then through this questioning process that some people tend to get frustrated with, you get and I'll talk about that in a second, you get sorted into this next category, time sensitive or not time sensitive. Where you should derive confidence, right, in this system is in two parts. It's agnostic. It doesn't care about anything about you except for the fact that you've accessed the system and you need help. And the system is designed to quickly differentiate between time sensitive and not time sensitive. And the longer you're on the phone answering questions, the less urgent your situation is in general. Granted, things could always, there's a possibility for things to change. Now we're switching from that discussion over to another set of questions. And there's some question about how the whole thing is organized. So at the top, you see there's the county council, elected officials, much like yourselves, the county executive, and then there's the county code. The county code, chapter 21, outlines the duties of the fire department, and what it requires is that we be competent, that we deliver equitably, right? So again, that notion of equity. And then I want to point out its requirement that we work in partnership, the county and these local fire rescue departments, right? So the fire chief is in charge, right? He has total operational control and total budgetary control. And he has this group of advisory partners, including local fire departments, the fire commission, the volunteer association, and the labor partners from the International Association of Firefighters. And on the operational side, the part that I kind of try to manage for him is our operational staff and the operational staff of the local volunteer fire departments, right? The key takeaway from this is that the fire chief has control over operations and over the budget allocation that is designed by the county executive. He submits the budget to the council. It's approved by the council, and then the fire chief oversees and executes that, right? Now, when we talk about resource management, the fire chief and the local fire departments work together. It's a team. It's required by our county law to be a team. There are 19 total entities, and if I have time at the end, I'll give you a tidbit, some historical tidbits. Some of those programs, those 19 local volunteer fire departments, have operational presence. Some of them only have an administrative presence. But this slide also shows you some of the other partners that we have to talk to and deal with in order to get the work of the fire department done. Now, there was a question about planning, and I want to kind of highlight where we are with planning. There are a lot of things that go into planning. Now, last night, I was trying to resize all these buttons so that you didn't derive any, sense of value from one shape over the other, but I couldn't make it work. So just because the shape's bigger doesn't mean it's more important. It just means I couldn't figure out how to make it work. But what you see is that we do have a master plan. Our master plan is set to expire in July. We are looking to extend that master plan for a few months because we have some studies going on and some other system evaluations. But the annual budget, the accreditation process, the fire department is fully accredited by an independent third party. And what that speaks to more than anything is the fact that we're not making stuff up on the fly, that we have a rigorous methodology for making assignments, assessing risks, and deploying resources. And then you see in red, I put this notion, this idea of historical data. Historical data is a huge driver of what happens next. Now, so in terms of the master plan, that master plan is executed by under the fire chief's authority. It's written primarily by our planner. The fire department has a planner with a lot of input from fire department staff, including volunteers and our labor partners. We went through a few sessions in the late fall, early winter really trying to hammer some stuff out and get some of our ideas right. And what that plan looks like is, how do we expect to engage the next 6 years of, the universe? As I understand it, right, there is no direct community-based input and no mechanism to do that with regards to actually drafting the master plan. And I think if you could imagine, if I had to include every single municipality. However, there is representation because the council does have to approve the master plan. And I think this is almost my last slide, and I'll be done. I want to talk to you about a partnership. The Bethesda Fire Department is a private corporation. It owns 3 big properties, even though I only gave them 2 bullets. One's at the Bradley Lane site, one's on Democracy Boulevard, and one's on Cedar Lane. And they've been at this for a long time. When they first started, they were volunteer driven. I think it was 1939 when they started paying people to provide that service for Bethesda. And it stayed that way with a paid staff until about 2017. In 2017, the Bethesda Fire Department took the initiative to try to increase its operational footprint, starting first with increasing or providing some ambulance service out of that work site or out of that station. On the other side, part of that team is Montgomery County Fire Rescue. So for the most part, we own the apparatus. Remember, the chief has that budgetary control. We maintain the infrastructure. We control the staffing. We certify the personnel. But here at the bottom is something that's kind of important. We don't control, nor do we meddle in the operational affairs of that corporation. Okay. And then I want to highlight this last thing at the end, which says Chapter 21 requires us to be engaged in a partnership with the local volunteer fire departments. And that's something we take very seriously. Now, I said that's the end. And I said it in French because I wanted to show off. But the question is, if you got a second and you're interested, I'll just take a thumbs up from Ms. Rovac or Mr. Slavin. I'll tell you about the history. Okay.
Definitely.
All right, let me tell you about a little bit of history. When I looked this up, it kind of is mind-boggling. The first discussion of fire service in Montgomery County actually predates this. It was in 1806 where the General Assembly approved a lottery to buy a fire truck for Rockville. Nobody knows that I know of what actually happened with that. The first fire station in this county started in 1895. I put a picture up there for you in Tacoma Park. And this is something important. Why is the Tacoma Park station where it is? There was a fire or some other tragedy at Tacoma Park, and a bunch of citizens got together, bought a fire engine, and where did they put the fire station? Where there was space available, right? And if you think back to 1895, there was a little bit more space than there is now. So you see there, Silver Spring, 1915, Bethesda starts in 1926, and they were all paid from 1939 in terms of the operational piece up until 2017. An interesting piece is the Conduit Road Fire Board, which runs the Glen Echo Fire Department, was actually created again in response to a bad fire, and I can't remember where it was, but the Maryland General Assembly actually mandated the presence of that fire district or fire board. A little bit more about the history. The county was formed in 1776. You know all the rest. The first mention of fire codes or some centralized control was in 1949. We don't get our first executive to 1968, and that's the same year that the fire department is made a fire department, so to speak. But even then, most of the control was maintained locally with the volunteers. In 1987, we get 1987-88, we get the paid personnel all become county employees. It's not till 2003 that we get a uniformed fire chief with operational control and full budget oversight. So when you start thinking about putting things in perspective, the county has 245 years of history, 126 years of fire department activity, but centralized control and budget authority is less than 20 years old. There's still a lot of stuff and a lot of thinking to unravel. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen. Yes, sir.
Okay, well, Chief Bailey, I want to thank you for that incredibly thorough and concise tutorial on a very complicated topic. And what's particularly exciting is that, you know, we have 3 town committees that are very interested will be very interested in your talk, because we have an equity and inclusion committee. Of course, we have a public safety committee, and we have a history and archives committee, and you gave a lot of meat for all 3 of those committees. So I greatly appreciate that, and I know that this presentation is going to be a great tool for us and other municipalities to use to educate our citizens. Before I turn it over to Councilor Robeck again, I do want to recognize that Mayor Barney Rush of Chevy Chase is here, and Council Member Irene Lane. So thank you for joining us today. So I'm going to, well, before I ask Councilman Robeck, I wanted to thank Chief Esch again for being here, and to see if he wanted to briefly say hello. Thanks for reorganizing your schedule to be here.
Hello, everybody, Mr. Mayor, council members, and community members. Just want to thank you for the opportunity to meet with you today and the opportunity to introduce the Bethesda Fire Department to you.
Well, thank you, and congratulations on your recent appointment. And we all look forward to working with you very closely on your important mission. Thank you. Councilor Robeck, did you have any follow-up questions that you wanted to ask any of these great officials?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that very thorough presentation. It was very informative. I just had like some very basic questions. So like on any given day for the Bethesda Fire Department, that's just right up the road from us, how much of the staff there is full staffers by Montgomery County, and how much is it volunteers?
So you have 1 engine with 4 people, 24/7 county staff. You have 1 ladder truck, that's 3 people, 24/7 county staff. You have an ambulance that is for 10 hours a day, 2 people, county staff, and that's Monday through Friday. And then on nights and weekends, to the best of their ability, the Bethesda volunteers provide 2 people to staff that ambulance. I don't know the exact numbers and then whatever. What I will tell you is that they have been making a Herculean effort to provide that resource. To put that in context, please don't be offended, I don't see it as a loss given the presence of the surrounding units if they don't put that unit in service. But at the system level, every night that they put that system in service, they make things better and easier for everyone.
Great. And so, so is that ambulance technically owned by Montgomery County Fire and Rescue, or is that owned by the Bethesda Fire Department?
We own the unit now, but to be fair, that's not true across the board in the county. And there has been some discussion by Bethesda about purchasing their own transport unit, right? But as it stands today, that vehicle is owned by the county.
Okay, and then for Chief Esch, so and Chief Bailey. So Chief Ash, are you a Bethesda Fire Department employee or are you a Montgomery County Fire and Rescue employee?
I'm a volunteer of the Bethesda Fire Department.
When the ambulance was, for my understanding is that ambulance was first allocated to the Bethesda Fire Department around 2018. I might be off on that number. But when it was decided that there was going to be an ambulance that was placed into that station, was that based on a certain need going back to your historical data and such? Or, you know, if we don't necessarily need that now, was there a need at one point, and why did we get one there?
So that's a great question. I don't have the charts in front of me, but if you can imagine a sine wave drawn on a graph, our need or the system demand varies very, very predictably based on time of day and day of week. So we can pretty much tell you that on Wednesday afternoons between 2:30 in the afternoon and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there's going to be a lot of sick people. And weirdly enough, when I worked in the Burtonsville area, Sunday nights were horrible. Like we all wanted to be off on Sunday nights because we just were up all night. Why? I don't know, but it's very predictable. So the need or the demand varies by time of day, such that while it might be necessary and prudent to have an ambulance staffed with paid staff during the day at Bethesda, it is not as necessary to do the same thing at nighttime.
And so there was probably a reason why it went into the station for the daytime hours.
Oh, most definitely. And it probably has a lot to do with demand and the influx of working people into Bethesda in that area during the daytime hours, right? Because Wisconsin Avenue is pretty, and that downtown Bethesda corridor is pretty busy during the day.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, and then we had one question from a resident that came in, just a clarification. Can you confirm that the BLS unit at Station 7 that you referenced is a BCC RS placed unit?
Oh, absolutely. So the BCC Rescue Squad has been providing consistent and wonderful service for many, many years. And they have, and I've seen some discussions about it, they operate out of the Battery Lane station, and they're always looking for ways to help. But part of the drive to be a volunteer, and one of the benefits, right? No one volunteers to be in the fire department to sit around the station and play checkers, right? They want to go, right? They want to do stuff. They want to be involved, right? So if there are 4 EMS units sitting at the Battery Lane station, that's 4 units or 3 units fighting for the same slice of the pie. So they've explored with Bethesda Fire Department to a limited extent. They've explored with Chevy Chase and have now executed out of Chevy Chase the placement of extra units. So they maintain their core service out of Battery Lane, and now they're trying to support this extra unit out of Chevy Chase, which, by the way, has been really good for the citizens of Bethesda. With an EMS unit in Chevy Chase, the demand for service in Chevy Chase, which was drawing away transport resources, right, is now gone. And it helped Kensington and it helped Bethesda because there's increased availability for units in your area. So yes, to be more concise, BCC has been a wonderful partner throughout all of this.
Okay, great. And do we know, do we utilize the BCC Fire and Rescue or BCC Rescue Squad volunteers in our Bethesda Fire Department?
So there have been discussions about that. I don't know that anything has worked out. I think right now the focus is we have a new chief of Bethesda. His name's Victor Esch. There was obviously some turmoil and it was not the easiest of transitions. And what we're focused on right now is providing him with the support necessary to get things turned around there and build and meet the mandate of our elected officials, which is establishing and maintaining a strong partnership with Bethesda. I think there's hope for that. And listen, I'll be honest with you, starting a volunteer program takes years and it's hard. I've done it in other places, and especially when you're essentially starting from scratch. From the time you walk into a Bethesda station and become a volunteer to the time you're fully operational can take 2-3 years, right? And that's really, it's really hard to do and balance that against your family, school, and other things. So that's what we're focused on from the county perspective, is making sure Chief Esch and President Finkelstein have the support they need from us to build up a contingent of volunteers there. Yes, ma'am.
And so do you guys then, and this might be a question for Chief Kelly, do you then, like, let's say that you've got, these 6 different stations that are around our area and they each have different levels of volunteers. Do you try to like move the volunteers, around to fill up holes that, maybe the Bethesda Fire Department doesn't have as many, or does it work like that? Or how does that volunteer staffing, decisions, do they get made on a global, basis overview?
Chief Kelly?
Yes, hello. The local fire departments do a very good job with getting word out if they're short and they need some assistance, okay? And by the way, one of the other locations that BCC helps with Bethesda is over at Station 26 on Democracy Boulevard, where they staff the unit over there. So word will get out among the local chiefs that we need help on a certain period of time, and if you have extra personnel, we can put them to work over here. Now, what makes that difficult is that that home department needs to take care of their own place first, So, and I'll use as a good example is the Glen Echo Department, which Chief Bailey mentioned a few minutes ago. They provide extra service, and they have their own ambulance there. When they have extra staffing and they put that unit in service, one of the first things that our 911 communication center will do is say, we need you over here. And they become the kind of the flex unit of the county. And if the need is over in Kensington somewhere, or up in Rockville or Gaithersburg, they'll send them over there. So there's a great opportunity for volunteers to not sit around, that there are other locations. We also have a large number of volunteers that join more than one location. And so they might be a member of 2 departments. I know at least one member of Bethesda is part of 3 different departments, and wherever she is needed, that's where she will go. Hope that answers that.
Great, thank you. And then I know that you had said that there's 2 volunteers that do work overnight for the Bethesda Fire Department ambulance. There's 2 volunteers that staff the overnight. Is there hope that there would be more volunteers to staff that ambulance, or not really?
Well, let me be clear. I may have misspoke, and I was trying to type the message, and I'm going to have to leave you in a moment or two. But we cannot currently say that every night of the week there are 2 volunteers from Bethesda that staff the ambulance. At 5 o'clock, the 2 career people go home, and to the extent that they can, 2 persons from Bethesda staff the ambulance for the overnights, right? The hope is that we staff it as much as possible, but from considered at a population risk level and on a resource demand level, it's really not a negative if they don't. So when they do, it's a positive. When they don't, I don't consider it a negative. Okay. But obviously with everybody, we want to fill as many of those seats as possible.
Great, thank you. I will turn over questions to Public Safety Chair Kumar Vaswani, if you have any questions at this point. Okay, and thank you guys all.
Thank you, Councilor Rovak. Before we turn it over to the chair, I think Chief Bailey might have to leave soon, and I wanted to thank him on behalf of the town. I also want to recommend to Chief Richards, I think today 2 TV stars have been created, and you might want to take the Rovak Bailey show on the road and get them an agent, because I think that it was an outstanding interchange there. So Chief Bailey, do you need to leave now?
No, I have a few minutes for your safety
Okay,
chair's
wonderful.
questions.
Yes, let's, I want to call on our outstanding new Public Safety Committee Chair, Kumar Vaswani, to see if he has any comments or questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I also want to thank Chief Goldstein, Chief Bailey, Chief Richards, Chief Kelly, and Chief Esch. And I also just want to disclose my affiliation. I am a member of the BCC Rescue Squad, but I'm here as a concerned citizen and a resident. And everything I've written to our council has been based on the public record and the county website and the BFD website as well. So I was actually going to do this in a different order, but since Chief Bailey is here, I wanted to make sure he's here for this question. Chief Esch, I want to ask about staffing, but first I want to ask about equipment. Does your ambulance have a power cot and a power loader?
It does not.
Okay. Have there been any mishaps involving what they call cot drops or stretcher tip overs with, or any other incidents where patients have been injured while being transported by ambulance 706?
I'm going to have to interrupt you with that and say that for most obvious reasons, that's an unfair question and certainly can't be discussed in this forum.
Well, I don't think
the fact that the cot drops have happened is a fact, and it's the public record. The fact that there's some incidents for which there are ongoing litigation precludes us from getting into details about those drops, and I don't think it's appropriate that we should do it here.
Well, I understand that, but let me ask you this.
Yes, sir.
When the county buys new units, are you buying them with the power stretcher and the power loader?
I believe so. And to kind of put that in perspective, I think you know this because I think most BCC units have them. You're talking about an additional $50,000 on a $200,000 ambulance or $300,000 ambulance. So it is not a small issue. The issue with stretchers in general has less to do with whether the cot is a power load cot and more to do with the fact that the center of gravity shifts with different types of stretchers. And what we found was that our personnel were not appropriately acclimated to those shifting centers of gravity. It was a physics issue. And you would know or be aware of the fact that we went through a pretty robust training program last year that was interrupted like everything else by COVID. But in terms of specifics of where they occurred and how they occurred, that's where I don't want to go.
Okay, well, let me ask you, what's the expected replacement date for the unit that's used as ambulance 706?
I don't know, but I will say this. I mean, I feel like it seems that maybe people would feel less safe without a power cut, and I don't want them to, because when I started, right, we actually physically lifted the stretcher into the ambulance, right, and sometimes it was me who's kind of tall and somebody was kind of short. I don't want anyone on this call to take away the notion that there's a correlation between the type of stretcher, the type of stretcher and the indices of persons being dropped. If there is a correlation, the correlation lies in people operating equipment they're not familiar with. So you're not any safer by having a power cot. You're safer because our guys were trained better, and we're taking steps to do that.
Well, I think there is a reason why the county's new units are coming with the power cot and the power loader. And
I can speak to
Yeah.
that.
the other reason is it may be reducing injuries to the providers themselves,
So, and
back
I'm-
injuries. And
Yep, so I'm glad you brought that up, because at the time we started exploring the power cot concept, the number one reason for getting a power cot was to avoid back injuries. However, our data collection methodology in risk management is not as robust as our data collection in EMS. And I was unable to draw a valid correlation between stretcher use and back injuries. So while it makes sense intuitively that power cots reduce back injuries, there's been no noticeable decrease in back injuries since the introduction of power cots, and I couldn't correlate them statistically anyway.
Well, I will just say that knowing what I know now, I'd rather be a patient on a power cot rather than a manual cot. And I'm just wondering if, and maybe this is a question for Chief Esch, if BFD can get that equipment for your current unit.
We will work with him. I believe, and I can't promise you this, and if you need me to, I'll get back to you. I believe that's standard equipment on new stuff. I'm not going to promise you here on the phone today that I'm going to expedite the replacement cycle for a unit based solely on that factor. But give me some time to talk it over, and Chief Esch and I can certainly have some conversations about that.
I think that'd be much appreciated. And thank you, Chief Bailey. If I could ask Chief Esch about the staffing situation, what's the current staffing situation now on the volunteer side?
Before I get into that, I'll just mention that, as you know, I've only been on the job for a little bit more than a month, but I've already put a exploratory team together to investigate the feasibility of retrofitting our existing ambulance with the power cot. Ultimately, finances will come into. There are a lot of moving parts to this question, but affordability will undoubtedly be a topic of discussion, as will the replacement schedule of the existing one. So it's something that we are exploring. Regarding the staffing, we currently have, it's kind of a mixed bag. We have what we call we have 19 that are currently on staff, volunteers on staff. Of them, 11 of them are in the training mode. And within the last month, we've also brought in 20 additional volunteer members who are going through the just the introductory process of becoming a volunteer. The majority of them will likely have to go through the initial training process as well. There are a handful that are coming to us already trained, so that process is expedited. But so we've added an additional 20, and we hope to be growing at substantially the same rate moving forward.
Okay, well, just going back to that concept of a partnership that Chief Bailey referred to, the Bethesda Fire Department is also a partnership between the communities and Bethesda Fire Department Corporation, because the communities have representatives on the board. So the communities kind of do have a responsibility to oversee it a little bit. And when then Vice President and now President Finkelstein came to our September 30th Public Safety Committee meeting. He said he'd provide us with data on staffing, and we haven't received that yet. So would you be able to give us data, say, on each of the last 24 months as to how many hours ambulance 706 has been uncontrolled or not staffed for each month, just so we can see what your progress is towards getting that fully staffed?
Who is the question directed to, please?
Sorry, Chief Ash, that was for you.
I see no reason why we can't find that information for you.
Okay, that'd be much appreciated. And it was actually promised to us back in September by President Finkelstein. We didn't receive it. So Mayor, should I turn it over to you?
Yes, and thank you. I'm sure that that your committee will be working closely with the chief, and I greatly appreciate the questions, and it's great today that we could have the beginning of this ongoing, which I hope will be an ongoing relationship. So with that, I wanted to see if Council President Steve Serco had any questions or would like to say something.
Sorry, thank you. I've had to move on to another meeting. I've just been catching what's been said. Thank you all for your for pulling this event together.
Okay, thank you, sir. Council Member Barr, do you have any questions?
Well, thank you to you all for coming and giving us such great detail. My head is swimming with information at the moment. And what was clear to me at the end is this, as our mayor said, this is part of an ongoing conversation. There clearly are questions still to be answered and information still to be gathered. So I appreciate your willingness to help in all that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Council Member Heller.
Thanks for a great presentation. I really appreciate it. I've learned a lot. But I have a little question that I've been asked by some of our residents. Do you guys feel that when you come into our neighborhoods and you drive in with your trucks and ambulances, that you can find our houses clearly? Are we numbered so you can see us, or do we need better numbering?
Do you want me to take that question? I can take the question. Do you want me to answer that for you? I can.
Yes, please.
So I don't think as a whole that we can say that the town of Somerset is improperly numbered. I think that with every community throughout Montgomery County, we do occasionally find people whose numbering is not quite as clear. And so what we like to share with people is that if you can imagine on a foggy night when it's raining and when you are when you're driving down your road, I would ask, are you able to see the numbers? Are your neighbors able to see your numbers? And so generally, you know, we like to have an opposing background. So if your house is a dark color, you have light reflective numbers, or vice versa, and at least 4 inches in size. So I think it's not, I think it's a, you know, when people design their homes, that may be something that they don't necessarily think about. Our mapping system gives us, you know, a general idea, but it doesn't take into account every single house. So it may not show us your exact location. So some of those things, it's very similar to oftentimes when we have heavy snows, we ask people to clear out the fire hydrants around their homes, because again, our mapping system is general and doesn't show us very specifically. So things like having numbers that are reflective, that can be seen from the street in the worst conditions. If it's rainy, if it's foggy, you know, if we shine a light in that general area, do we get a good contrast for reflection? And also little things, general housekeeping rules, you know, are the bushes trimmed back enough? The numbers may be a great size, but if the bushes and the trees kind of, you know, provide a cover, we may not be able to see it as well. If it's a heavy snow and the fire hydrant is covered over, we may have a general idea where it is, but you have a better idea. So for those types of things, we really ask our neighbors to help us out and kind of measure each other with those types of visual, with that kind of visual assistance. Does that make sense?
It does. So if I get this, it's really not a one size fits all in terms of numbers on our homes. It's really what makes sense, that we have to use our common sense and stand back from our house and take a look and see what can you see when you come up the
Yes,
block.
that's exactly right. And, you know, it may be, you know, you may say, and you think we may look in a number of different, we may look at the house itself. Some people have them painted on the street curb. Some communities have undertaken kind of that, put it on the curb in a certain size lettering in front of the house. Some people may put it on their mailbox. It varies. So just kind of help us put yourselves in our shoes and know that we know the neighborhood, or perhaps maybe not as well, and kind of help each other make those assessments. It's night, it's dark, it's rainy, it's foggy. Can you see your neighbor's numbers? If you're standing in your front yard, can you see the person, clearly see the person's address that lives across the street from you?
Right. Okay, thank you. That's great. That's great information. We'll share it with our residents.
Yeah, please do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Mr. Town Manager, I believe that Councilmember Kumar had to leave, Kabir Kumar had to leave, but you have a question from him.
Yes, unfortunately, he had to leave at 1, but wanted me to express his thanks to everybody for coming and giving us this important information and participating in the forum. He was wondering if there's data available, or I'm sorry, I don't know if this is a question necessarily for Chief Richards or maybe Chief Bailey, but if there's data available, or if anybody's able to provide us with some general data on response times in Somerset and or the surrounding area.
Yeah, we can certainly get you some response times, and kind of like Chief Bailey alluded to, it's relative. If there is a unit that, let's say it just happens to be on Battery Lane, and our computer GPS sees that unit and dispatches them to your neighborhood, their response time may be quicker than maybe later on in the evening, or doing a snowstorm, or doing, a high traffic time. But, our response times are kind of in averages. It's how often, what percentage of the time do we get there, between 4 and 6 minutes, let's say. So it's not definitive. And so, you may have an experience where we were there in 1 minute. Your neighbor may have an experience where we're there in 5 minutes. We have not done your neighbor a disservice. That just happens to be where the unit is coming from at that particular time. I don't know if that's helpful. We can provide you kind of with averages and what the response is 90% of the time, given these certain conditions. But it doesn't take into account that it's traffic. It doesn't take into account that there may be an accident on the path that we have to navigate around. It's just, given kind of a static response. It's, the fire state or the ambulance or the fire engine is in the fire station. They're, uninterrupted by anything else. It takes account, it does not take into account all those things. So I don't know if that helps answer your question. Does that kind of give you
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be great. But understanding, as you said, and Chief Bailey also explained in his presentation, that there's some context as well to individual response times.
Yeah, and I think it's often it's important for people to understand the context. And I find it to be a little bit when we're not able to give that context and we just simply provide data, then I think that sometimes is it becomes a little challenging.
Well, thank you. And I see that our time is about to expire. I want to again thank Chief Richards, Chief Kelly, Chief Ash, and Chief Goldstein and Bailey, who had to leave, for this fantastic opportunity for us to learn more about our fire service and to get a lot of our questions answered. And I want to say to our citizens who were not able to, if there were any further questions, to please put them in writing to our town manager, and we will get you the responses. And, you know, I view this today as the beginning of a new, stronger relationship between our town and the Bethesda Fire Department, and of course, the Montgomery County Fire Department. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you again. Have a great day.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I may, please. I just wanted to thank you for inviting me to participate in today's forum. And I view today as a springboard to a mutually beneficial partnership between the Bethesda Fire Department and Somerset. This meeting actually preempted my plans to meet with each community organization. So regarding Somerset, I look forward to a regular and meaningful dialogue and partnership with the community.
Well, thank you. We greatly appreciate that. We'll see you soon.